welcome to another edition of Radharc.
Hello and welcome to Radharc.
This 1971 Radharc documentary shadows the island priest of Inisheer, Father Paddy Gilligan. From the viewpoint of the camera and Father Gilligan, we catch a glimpse of a community facing the inevitability of change, but not quite at the same hectic pace as the rest of 1970s Ireland.
During the winter months, provided that the weather's fine, the Naviana calls twice a week at Inisheer. The ship takes the best part of a day on the journey. It leaves Galway early in the morning and stops first at Inisheer, the largest of the Aran Islands. Inisheer, the smallest of the three islands, is the last stop. One of the first people on board the ship during its short stopover is the priest. In wintertime, he's usually the only non-islander on Inisheer, the one stranger among the 300 closely interrelated people of the island. For them, the visit of the ship brings the things that the island can't produce: fuel, clothing, machinery, household goods. But for the priest, it means something more. The few minutes on the deck of the Naviana are the nearest he gets to the mainland, his one chance to catch up with the newspapers and to meet and talk to someone that comes from the outside world. The world that lies beyond the 2 square miles of Inisheer and the foaming winter ocean that surrounds it. The coastline of Inisheer is guarded by a ring of jagged rocks. Ships have often been driven onto these rocks by the heavy Atlantic waves. Some of them have been pounded to pieces by the sea. Others have been left high and dry, gradually falling apart under the attack of wind and weather. Understandably, ships are cautious about approaching the island in stormy weather, and in wintertime it can be cut off from the mainland for weeks at a time. The priest's house is on one of the highest points of the island. In his living room, over the fireplace, there hangs his minute class piece, with the photographs of all the priests who were ordained the same year as himself. He rarely has a chance to meet them, or to meet any other priests at all, except during the period of the summer holidays. Yet the isolation of Inisheer has its consolations for Father Paddy Gilligan.
Or a bottleneck. In addition to the main roadworks in Morehampton Road, you are very strongly advised to try to avoid the area if you possibly can. Again, can we mention...
You see, that's what I mean. They've all sorts of problems, getting stuck up in traffic jams and everything, and it's so great to be away from it all. But then there's other problems because you're on an island. But I think that you can exaggerate it an awful lot. The boys up in Dublin trying to get through in the traffic jam, they're worried stiff, they're all tensed up and nervous and everything. And you're down here, and often it's the other extreme, really. You know, it's just that you can't get into this situation where you can get tensed up. But this is one of the things that I get a kick out of. You know, people say to you, have you got electricity? No. What? Well, and do you have a car? No. Ah, well, I mean, that's it, really, no car. But I think what they forget is that things like electricity, well, that's important, all right, something we'll have in a year, I'd say. But a thing like a car, that's only useful if you want to go a long distance. And if you happen to go, there's no point having talking it to itself out at the gate there. It's just something you use to travel. I use the bike instead.
The island of Inisheer is gradually moving into the 20th century, although it doesn't seem to be in any particular hurry about it. At the moment, the islanders are digging trenches through the sheer rock in order to lay pipes for their first ever piped water supply. During the months of winter, there's usually some county council work to give employment to the menfolk. Roadworks aren't very important since there are no cars on the island, but the water scheme will be a worthwhile amenity for the islanders and their summer visitors. Tourism has become an important part of the island's economy, along with the more established pursuits of fishing and potato growing. Many of the men on Inisheer still wear the traditional dress of the Aran Islands, the homespun trousers, the coloured belt or kris, the sleeveless vest that's worn in place of a jacket or overcoat. But they've also learned some new ways of dealing with old problems, such as the use of Gaelic to dispose of particularly stubborn stretches of rock. This particular explosion is being set off within a few yards of the church, so special care is taken to make sure that no damage is done and the blast is well damped down with metal plates and sandbags. As soon as the fuse begins to burn, the warning whistle is blown and everyone within earshot takes cover.
Now, then the installation power grid is headed in.
Page 38, the roundabout, round and round the roundabout, down the slippery stair. I'm always to be found about when circus men are there.
Now,
There's one school on Inisheer, a primary school for boys and girls. Any children who want to continue their education further must go to the mainland. Most of them will go, and many of them will never come back except for holidays. For that reason, they must give special attention to the study of English, the language that many of them will have to use for the rest of their lives. The priest is the only person on the island who isn't a native speaker of Irish, though by now he can speak it as fluently as any of the islanders. But he still thinks in English, just one more thing that marks him off as an outsider.
Come on. Well, Bedroom Marshal not in your combination, Kahin or the Honey ship. Ruddy hook ship for Jan. Shan? Come on, Shan.
Viti maista huosakin on maista hana vi paistu lena hiisakin nahtarinis.
Shin and Rod, being bashed who's again now or a dose nach raw. Shin point you one. Well, ain't point yellow for Inish. Tussie down.
Vi slår i dagens där vi har bästa här att det sker då.
Varför? People often say to me, it must be lonely. But I think loneliness is a frame of mind rather than a physical location. Because, there are an awful lot of lonely people in the heart of Dublin or London. So I don't see any reason why just being away from the mainland or something like that is a good reason to be lonely.
The first day I came to Inisheer, it was the most beautiful day. It really was sunny, bright and warm. So I was downstairs in the boat and I just came up, and in the distance I saw this beautiful white reflection in the sun. And this was, my heart gave a jump, the sort of excitement I'll always remember, because it struck me that this is going to be my home, and isn't it beautiful? That sort of a start gave me a great fill-up, and there's a way in which that type of excitement and thrill I got at the first day I came has stayed with me all along.
The history of Inisheer isn't written in books, but in stones. The island was inhabited many thousands of years ago by a race of people of whom nothing is known today, apart from the forts and walls and tombs that they left behind them. After the coming of St. Patrick, Inisheer became a sanctuary of Christian piety. Many saints came to live here, among them St. Cavan, whose church still stands half buried by the shifting sand. They chose Inisheer as a place of solitude, where they could withdraw into voluntary exile from the things of the world and pass their days in prayer and penance. Later on, the island was to become a place of exile of a different kind. During the Cromwellian period, many priests were imprisoned here, and the island became for a time a kind of penal settlement. In recent years, some priests have continued to look on Inisheer as a place of exile, if not actually a penal settlement. Although the people have always been deeply religious, there were times when relations between the priest and his parishioners were somewhat strained. He found it hard to be part of the community, not only because he was an outsider, but because he was a priest, hedged about by all the reverence and fear that went with his position. It's only in the last few years that relations have become more natural. Father Paddy finds it easier than most of his predecessors to enter into the life of the people, both on Inisheer and on the nearby island of Inishmaan, which he visits every week to say Mass and hear confessions.
You'd need to have tremendous confidence in the teams who row you across, and this is something I have. I believe that they're men really capable who know the sea, and I just leave it to them, and after that I've no worries. I believe that they're sensible not to go out if it's dangerous, and if they go out, that it is safe. Of course, there was a new thrill for me when I had my first trip in Cork. This was something new to me. I'd often heard all right about those little boats with laths and covered with canvas and a bit of tar around them. But to feel that you were sitting in the back of one of those, bobbing along from one island to the other, well, it just was hard to believe the first time. And all sorts of thoughts and emotions crossed me. The first thing that crossed me was the sea journey of St. Paul to Rome. I couldn't help thinking of this thing as the way he described it in such vivid terms and everything like that. And again, Paul's description of how he was shipwrecked 3 times. I hoped that first day that this wasn't going to be my experience.
He has been a figurehead
a sort of up on a pedestal all along, more so than at present. In fact, Father Paddy at the moment has seemed to have put an end completely to all that, have made a great change. And if I could give you an example of this, that just a week ago, we had a party after finishing a play over in the hall, and he could come along to the party and sit down by the side of a barrel of stout and fill up the mugs and keep on doing that all night. And this was taken by the young people at the party to be quite a natural thing for him to do, which would have been an unprecedented thing, an unbelievable thing in years gone by. And I suppose that it may be that the older generation looked upon the priest as being the person who should not do such a thing, and maybe that many priests found themselves forced into an isolated position.
The church on Inisheer has a bell to call the congregation to Sunday Mass, but is never rung. Instead, the people watch the sea, and as soon as they spot the curragh bringing the priest back from Inishmaan, they know it's time to start moving towards the church. During the hour-long journey across the Sound, the priest has plenty of time to collect his thoughts for his sermon. Today is the last day of the Christmas holidays for the secondary school children. By next Sunday, almost all the young people will be gone from the island. The absence of these young people for the greater part of the year is a thing that brings its own problems and causes its own strains in family life. It's about the way of dealing with these strains and problems that the priest wants to talk today.
Sheshin Briher J. A Phobal J. Ornta been in Tora Mamsa, Gunyen for Stroncheri than a Dina Oga, nor a quarter ig a manskoil eid. Mar nor a tagan she the wilder, is only a vinchid biognach in a courtjori. Barry wad, bouquet the horchdoib, agus I the coramaha blam bow. No, corra horchdoib, see shees in a eidi nua.
On the Sunday evening, there's a dance in the parish hall. The last dance of the Christmas holidays. Among those present is, of course, the priest. He doesn't have much alternative. It's a pretty small island.
There's a sense in which you're living very much in public while you're here in the island, because this isn't anybody's fault. It's just that the place is fairly small and you can't go off, say, for a few hours and get away from it, so that in a sense you're on the job all the time. But then from another point of view, this is advantages too, because I think this is something I felt tremendously when I was coming here first. The idea of going to somewhere that you were there 24 hours a day with them, and that you just threw yourself completely into the job. You know, there was no half measures about it, that you were going to be there or away. You were going into it full steam, and that was it. Well, my first job is to be a priest, and this, in order to be a priest in Inisheer, I feel I've got to show the concern for the people of Inisheer that Christ showed for the people he worked with. If I was to sum it up in one word, what I'd like to feel I was doing, I'd like to make people happy. And I'd like to feel that this would spill over to other people and that they'd have the benefit of me being around, that Inisheer was a little happier because I was here.
It's the last day of the Christmas holidays. It's fine and calm and sunny, and the Neaviana is on time. There's no escape. in the houses and cottages, the youngsters are finishing their packing and getting ready for their journey to the mainland and the boarding school.
I can't do it. Yes, I'm dressing gentle.
The casual onlooker, if there are any casual onlookers, might be pardoned for thinking that these were a group of tourists leaving Inisheer. It's hard to realise that the fashionably dressed boys and girls are the children of the island, that the men who are rowing them out to the ship are their fathers and uncles. There's something more than an age gap here. There's a crossroads between two cultures. The young people are getting the opportunities that their parents never had, and it can create difficulties and tensions on both sides. To try and smooth out some of these difficulties is one more job for the priest. In his sermon last Sunday, he pointed out that the difference in education is no reason for the youngsters to feel superior or for their elders to feel inadequate. By merely living on Inisheer, the older people have had an education that no school could ever provide.
Ordently been in Torum Amse, gegapen dine os rode nach Rashid heen a menskuil, nach min moran le torch den dine organish. When nilche shin fear karbe. Ta alles agus educus agavshe, nach fejer scholar be hort to gunne. She shin on educus hagans on seal. Agus gomor warren shahan hillan, nor vian seal cruas ne lein ta katche. Ta Fólum crua genta agi hon on educus shinna all. Ac mae awlar shin is educus cath atá on. Educus atá ystia de cri. Mar shin is féidir letsa e shinna hort de vor bosti sa glan. Tre ve har chimpel lob. Tre gna corsi in le. Nor a vinstu e goverlob agus e gulhar in engi. Tugan tu shin dob inganis de chain agus inganis dobson ag is educus táchtach é ho táchtach leis an educus atá si de fáil ar scail. Sin é an fá go greidium go bhfuil sé táchtach go mbeoch na daoine tá imi ar a menscail ghlacha a bhaile sa glán mar a mbeoch siad sa mbaile i gcónaí. Thesdaíonn an rud seo mhóib atá a chlán hain in anna hórtstób har dinner be elle. Agus sin é an fá go gafiú muína bheith as a tain go bhfuil rud agat le hórtstób agus sa gcuí sin ní bheith éon espa muínat as an méid is féidir leat a dhéanamh dóibh.
The young people are gone. The supplies are taken up the beach to the houses. The currachs are carried away. Life goes on as it's always done on the smallest of the 3 Aran Islands, the island of Inisheer.